Why would the oncologist be freaking out? It seems like if you're still doing what the big pharma people want you to do, and you're just adding this practically free treatment on top of it, what do they care, do you think?
I think they've seen other doctors really viciously demonized, and again, this comes back to those of us who were persecuted for supporting ivermectin, supporting hydroxychloroquine in COVID-19. We've lost, some of us have lost our licenses, and we haven't gotten back our licenses. Dr. Pierre Corey hasn't gotten back his license. He hasn't gotten back his internal medicine certification. Some of us have lost our jobs that we haven't gotten back. And so some of us were smeared in the media. We were called quacks. We were called nutcases. The disinformation dozen. We're always accused of disinformation. I was accused of putting out Russian disinformation. I'm still waiting for my check from the Kremlin, by the way. Still hasn't arrived.
Me too.
But the thing is, other doctors are watching, and they see their colleagues viciously attacked, demonized in a way that we've never seen in medicine. We have never seen this in medicine, this kind of persecution, right?
But I mean, why would big pharma care? They're still making their money off of the chemo treatments and the immunosuppressant treatments. I mean, they're still making their money selling their drugs and their treatments. But do you think that they view this as a threat? Like, well, if, maybe people will stop taking as many of those treatments, or is it that it cuts down the number of treatments they need and they don't like that? I mean, because you can't make money off a dead patient. So why would they want their patients to just die, right? Rather than, well, if this combination works and it prolongs their life and they maybe are cured, and then they could at least cross their fingers and hope the person gets cancer again in the future. I mean, because that's how sick and twisted big pharma is. But why do they care if an oncologist decides to add? I mean, do you think that's coming from the big pharma world, or do you think that's coming more from the fear of like what you're describing? Doctors just worried that, no, this has already been demonized, I don't even want to go near it.
Well, it's all connected. So the doctors will only get attacked if they are putting a dent into somebody's pocketbook. That's when doctors get attacked. Doctors don't get attacked for bringing up novel treatments that are interesting and fascinating, and they get attacked because someone's losing money or someone's not getting as much profit as they should be. Now, you have to think of this from the perspective of there's not just money in existing chemotherapy. And like I said, most of my patients are still taking the chemotherapy. The pharmaceutical industry is still getting rich. So that's not the problem, that a patient would take ivermectin and they'd have better symptoms. They'd have a better time, easier time with chemo, and they would have better effects. That's a win-win for everybody. That's a win-win for the patient, for the doctor, oncologist who looks like a genius, and it's also a win-win for the pharmaceutical industry because they still get to sell their chemo. I don't think that's where the problem is. I think the problem is that when they try to develop new drugs and new treatments, there's heavy investment into that, and they try to recoup that investment by making those new treatments extremely expensive. That's why when you see some of these new immunotherapy drugs come out, they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. CAR T-cell therapy costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is where, they'll take the tumor and they'll try to teach your immune system how to fight the cancer by showing it to your T cells and so on. Same thing with these mRNA cancer vaccines. I mean, we had Larry Ellison, give a press conference in the White House talking about how they're going to invest $500 billion into having AI develop mRNA cancer vaccines. I mean, $500 billion. They're not doing it as a philanthropy. They're not doing it as Russia Russia came out and said that they're going to develop mRNA cancer vaccines and give them away for free to the population. I would love to see what that technology is and whether it works or not. But, they're not giving these treatments away for free. That's why we don't have insulin for free. It was always, an interesting comment when you did the thought experiment of, if it was really about our health with the COVID-19 vaccines, that were, now it cost the taxpayer money, taxpayers billions of dollars. But if it was about health, they should be given insulin treatment for free. They should be given chemotherapy for free. None of this is being given, for free. And so they're afraid that if people start using repurposed drugs, and the repurposed drugs are a big area of medicine. There are established drugs that work extremely well for certain things that are now being discovered to work for things like cancer. And it's not just ivermectin, fenbendazole, mebendazole. There's doxycycline, which is an antibiotic, which has anti-cancer activity. Metformin, which is a diabetic drug, which has anti-cancer activity. So once you go down this path, once you open up this area of repurposed drugs, you're looking at patients, looking at options that are cheap. Again, it's all of these repurposed drugs are dirt cheap. How is the pharmaceutical industry, maybe they still keep making money on chemo, but what if they can't bring out that new mRNA cancer vaccine for $500,000 per treatment because nobody wants it? Because everyone is trying to find a supply of ivermectin or mebendazole or doxycycline or whatever it may be, and are treating their cancer that way, right? I still think it all comes back to the profit-driven model of the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah. What about these reports of ivermectin working for like rheumatoid arthritis and Parkinson's? I've heard it's treating some of the neurological stuff. I mean, explain, have you been treating any patients with those ailments, and has it been effective?
I have. And so, as you're sort of going into the research and you really discover fascinating things. And so I had stumbled across a research paper that had been done by a group of Middle Eastern researchers where they had tried ivermectin on a model of Alzheimer's in mice. And this study has actually been scrubbed from Google. So you actually cannot find it on Google. There used to be a PDF version of it available. You could read it. It's been scrubbed from Google. You have to go to DuckDuckGo to actually find it. And I discovered that I came across it by accident at some point. And, I have patients coming to me all the time and saying, look, I'm in a desperate situation. Can you suggest something? And so, a couple of times I suggested, you know what? There is this study that's been scrubbed from Google suggesting that ivermectin may actually have use in dementia. And that's actually what the authors concluded in the study that's been scrubbed that no one can get access to anymore. And so I said, look, try a small dose. Try 12 milligrams of ivermectin, 24 milligrams of ivermectin. These are low doses that you're not going to have any side effects. The risk-benefit ratio is very favorable. It's like saying, try aspirin, try Tylenol for your headache.
Right.
And they did. And some of these patients come back to me and they say, my loved ones started to recognize me. Their memory started coming back. They're amazing. They're up. They used to be bedridden. Now they're up and about. They're active. And so you get these testimonials. So you get this feedback. And what I love about working with repurposed drugs and just doing it in my role as a physician is that you get this feedback from patients, and they'll try something that's very safe. And then they'll come back to you, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but they come back and they tell you how the patient's responding. And so, ivermectin does have an effect on neurological receptors in the brain and also peripherally as well. I've seen tremendous success with ivermectin and Parkinson's disease. So I have several Parkinson's disease patients who are now much more mobile. Before they were not able to barely walk, and now they're out there playing golf. And they're on the maximum amount of the conventional Parkinson's drugs, and yet they're seeing improvements they haven't seen in years. Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease, I'm seeing improvements in both of those, multiple sclerosis as well. And so that's the neurological side. Ivermectin, there's one study, I believe, that shows that ivermectin had an effect on repairing myelin sheath on nerves. And so it has some ability to repair nerve damage. So I have patients with peripheral neuropathy who are feeling improvement on ivermectin. And then there's the anti-inflammatory effect of ivermectin. And so patients with rheumatoid arthritis have reported significant improvement in their symptoms. So now I have parents coming to me with children who have juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and their kids are getting better on ivermectin because of this powerful anti-inflammatory effect that ivermectin has. Rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, patients with Lyme disease have had tremendous improvement in their symptoms, fibromyalgia. And so, this, to me, this is fascinating as a physician. Now I'm taking the risk again. I'm sort of putting a target on my back by the pharmaceutical industry. I get attacked by what I think are bots from the pharmaceutical industry every day, telling me that I'm a quack, or that I'm doing something dangerous, or that I should be taken out or taken care of. So I get death threats on a regular basis as well. And this is unfortunately what you have to deal with when you're breaking new ground, when you're on the cutting edge of medicine, and you're pushing that cutting edge and making new discoveries. You're going to be attacked. But with the new administration, with President Trump appointing RFK Jr. to lead the HHS, and I believe that he will be confirmed, I think we're going to see a complete culture change. And we need it. The United States needs a complete change in the culture of medicine, the ethics of medicine and science. You have to give freedom back to doctors and scientists, untethered from financial considerations. Because I'm sitting here thinking about how I can make this patient's life better, how I can improve their symptoms, how I could maybe cure a certain condition that they've been struggling with for decades and have had no help from their doctor. I always say, how can I just improve, let's say through telehealth, a Parkinson's disease patient who hasn't seen improvement in 5 years or 10 years on the best drugs, and how can I give them improvement with this cheap drug called ivermectin? How come their family doctor's not doing this? How come the family doctor's not trying ivermectin for rheumatoid arthritis or dementia? Again, it's the culture. The culture has to change. You have to disconnect medicine from these financial incentives, financial obligations, and this revolving door of the three-letter agencies and the people who head those three-letter agencies, like the CDC, like the FDA, NIH, and Big Pharma, where you've got regulators at the FDA who are just waiting to go and work on the board of directors of some pharmaceutical company and make their millions of dollars as soon as they're done at the FDA. You have to break this revolving door of corruption in medicine. And I think we have a once in a generation, maybe once in a lifetime opportunity in the United States to do that. And I think it'll set off a domino reaction in other countries as well.
Yeah, I hope so. I certainly hope so. And it's crazy because when it comes to other drugs, I mean, one of the criticisms I hear from people about ivermectin in particular is they'll scream, this is an antiparasitic. This is for bugs, right? But it's like so many other medications they're willing to take, and they're totally accepting of that were used for something else. They were discovered for something else. And now they've discovered it works for XYZ thing. I mean, Ozempic is like one of those great examples right now. I mean, they're using Ozempic for gambling and for alcohol addiction and sex addiction. I mean, they're figuring out, saying, wow, this drug actually, something that was used for diabetes. Then they just, one of the side effects, the obvious side effect was weight loss with the diabetic patients. And then they thought, well, maybe we can give it to people for weight loss. And then they're finding, and now it does something to the brain, something completely different, does something to the brain that helps people stop craving things that are bad for them, including gambling. And so now they're saying we might give this to gamblers. I mean, who would have ever, if it were off label, not off label, if it were, no longer on patent, right? And they couldn't make a fortune on this stuff. That would seem like total quackery to people, the way that ivermectin being used to treat Parkinson's or cancer when this was an antiparasitic. People are not willing to accept that, but they're willing to accept Ozempic for gambling. It's just something in the brain that they're so great at gaslighting us.
Yeah.
At demonizing and the propaganda.
It is propaganda, and because we've been repurposing drugs for decades, this is nothing new. And you take something like aspirin. People take aspirin for headaches, and they also take it, for blood clots, and when they
Right.
to prevent another heart attack, for example, right? And so, I mean, we've been doing this for decades with repurposing drugs, and it's the smart thing to do. I mean, if you discover that a drug is good for something, and then you discover it's also good for something else, you're not going to use it just because
Right.
it was discovered to do one thing and it does another thing well, but you're not going to use it. That makes no logical sense. And so it all comes down to propaganda and how these things are, you know, propagandized in the
Yeah.
media
I
and
mean, it's
all.
crazy because we accept that premise for so many other drugs, like what you're just describing, even with aspirin. We accept this with practically everything else. But when it comes to ivermectin, I mean, it was just so demonized that people
And let me,
cannot accept. They just
and
can't.
let me, yeah, and let me tell you another thing that I find just absolutely fascinating is I will have patients who have stage 4 cancer. They have 3 to 6 months to live. They're being pumped full of the most poisonous chemo known to mankind. And they'll come to me and they'll say, "Oh, Dr. Makis, I'd love to try ivermectin or fenbendazole, but what about my liver? My oncologist told me it's going to destroy my liver. It's going to destroy my kidneys." And I'm sitting there thinking, you are being pumped full of the most toxic chemo imaginable, and you're not worried about that, and you're worried about these things affecting your liver or kidneys, when again the safety profile has been established for 4 decades, 15 times safer than aspirin, 750 times safer than remdesivir, but you're worried about that it might. Where's this coming from? And I've started asking the question, where is this coming from? Where are you hearing this? Well, my oncologist told me, my doctor told me, my family doctor told me, right? And so I think some of the fear that the doctors have, they're unloading it on the patient. And so, the doctor, now the fear of the doctors is their own career and their own license and their own jobs, as we talked about, because doctors have lost jobs, licenses, and so on for recommending ivermectin. Now, a patient comes into your office asking for ivermectin, you have to say something. You're not going to say, "Hey, listen, I don't know anything about it because I haven't been keeping up on my medical education for the last 20 years." You're not going to say that, which is
Hmm.
most of the time the case. Uh, you know, they're going to project their fear on the patient. They're going to say, "Oh, that stuff is going to destroy your liver. It's going to destroy your kidneys," right? And then the patient comes home and says, "My God, this is really scary. What if this stuff hurts my kidneys?" Meanwhile, they're getting toxic chemo that doesn't work. They've got 3 to 6 months to live. There's a lot of lying going on, and I find this a lot of doctors are lying to their patients, and they're
Yeah.
lying to their patients to really alleviate their own fears. They're projecting these fears on their patients, and it's sad. It's a toxic culture right now. Medicine is extremely in a very bad state. We have no medical ethics. Most of the doctors have thrown out their Hippocratic oath out the window to try to keep their jobs because of the COVID-19 vaccines that they were forced to push and lie about. They were forced to lie about the safety of the COVID vaccines. They were not allowed to tell the patients that there were dangers associated with the COVID vaccines. And so it's created a very, very toxic culture in medicine that we need to address. And I
Yeah.
think this is one of the things that RFK Jr. I hope will address. I believe he will. But we have to address this culture of doctors being of not giving informed consent, of feeling like they have to lie to their patients to protect themselves. We can't have that in medicine.
Right. Right.
We shouldn't have doctors lying to patients just to protect their job or to protect their medical license.
Um, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this about cancer being not the ailment, but the symptom or the protective symptom. The body, have you heard this where people say cancer is not the actual problem? Cancer is a reaction to your body having a problem. Like cancer is telling you there's a problem in your body and it's working as I'm not really, I don't know if I can articulate the exact what the thinking is, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but that people are saying what cancer is telling you to do is that you have something else toxic going on in your system, and so you have to detoxify, you have to stop eating junk, you have to stop I hear people say if you just change your diet, change the lotions you're putting on and all of these toxins that you're inserting into your body, then the cancer would naturally go away or something along those lines. Have you heard anything along like that, and what are your thoughts on that?
There are theories. There's a couple of theories that are very popular. And one of the theories is that cancer is parasites or cancer is caused by parasites. And another theory is that cancer is just a metabolic disease, and that if we just fix our diet or you starve the cancer a certain way, that you can treat a lot of these cancers and make the cancer go away. And unfortunately, cancer is a very complicated process. Now, the standard oncology view is that a lot of cancer is due to genetic problems or mutations that cells develop. Cells develop, a whole bunch of mutations, and then they become cancerous, and then they start, growing uncontrollably. And mainstream oncology completely ignores the metabolic aspect of cancer and completely ignores, any possible link to parasites, for example. And so you end up with a situation where doctors are telling their cancer patients, "So eat all the sugar and donuts and sweets you want because it doesn't affect cancer. We don't care." When in reality, you're supposed to cut out all the sugar because the cancer feeds on the sugar, uses it as a fuel. That's why we use PET scans to diagnose cancer, which is radioactive sugar. We look for where the cancer's utilizing that radioactive sugar the most. That's how we diagnose most cancers today. So it's a complex. Cancer is a very complex disease, and there's no simple answer to it. There is a metabolic component to cancer, and that's why keto diet can be, very successful in cancer and getting cancer under control, for example. But it's not just a metabolic disease, because if it was, we could cure all cancers with diet, and we can't. It just doesn't happen. I have patients who go on keto diets. I have patients who do fasting for 20 days, 30 days. They can get the cancer under control, but it's not the answer. Same thing with parasites. There may be a component to parasites or people having parasitic infections that might affect their microbiome, for example, that might affect their immune system, because a lot of these anti-parasitic drugs, like ivermectin, like fenbendazole, mebendazole, work in cancer. And we're actually finding that other antiparasitics, like niclosamide, also work in cancer. And so you're like, wait a minute, there has to be a connection. And there probably is. But again, if it was just parasites, you could give everyone an antiparasitic treatment and you could cure their cancer. And that's just not the case.
Right.
Now, some patients do get cured with ivermectin and fenbendazole, and then others don't. Like I said, there's no silver bullet in cancer. There's environmental exposures, of course. We know that exposure to asbestos can cause a cancer called mesothelioma. We know that the immune system plays a huge role in cancer. And so what I'm seeing is patients who've had COVID-19 vaccines, they develop these extremely aggressive cancers called turbo cancers. And it's probably because their immune system has been severely damaged. And we know that the spike protein damages the immune system in patients who've taken COVID-19 vaccines. And so AIDS patients who have HIV develop extremely aggressive cancers because their immune system is unable to deal with the cancers that they develop. So the immune system plays a huge role in cancer as well. So there are multiple factors in play. I don't subscribe to these sort of various theories that there's a quick answer. It's metabolic. It's parasitic. It's not. Cancer is a very difficult disease. If it was an easy disease, someone would be out there curing thousands and tens of thousands of cancer patients every day. And it's a very difficult disease to deal with. And I can tell you, sometimes patients, they respond amazingly well to these antiparasitic drugs, sometimes like ivermectin. Sometimes they respond amazingly well to a keto diet or to fasting. For example, prolonged fasting stimulates autophagy. The body starts killing off the cancer cells and so on. But there doesn't seem to be a sort of a quick fix or a quick solution. So I think cancer is an umbrella term. I think it's an umbrella term that covers a lot of different processes. And one person's cancer is different from the next person's cancer. Even one person's breast cancer is maybe completely different from the next person's breast cancer and the things that are causing it. So I think still, the field of oncology, as much as they love to think that, we know a lot about cancer, and they're doing all these tests to find all these, genetic defects, and then they try to, create drugs to match those issues. That's where a lot of the immunotherapy is. It's not very successful, and I think we just don't know much about cancer yet. And I think that we need to open up the research, and instead of having scientists pumping out research praising COVID-19 vaccines, because that's the only way to get research money these days for the last 5 years, or praising lockdowns or masking or whatever the government wanted to implement. Again, you have to fund true science, true medicine, have people go searching down these various avenues. Let's find out what role parasites play in cancer. I would love to know. Why are these antiparasitics working? Is there a role? Is there somehow that the parasites are contributing to cancer? I'll give you one amazing example. Dr. Sabine Hazan is a doctor who is a researcher in the microbiome, and she studies gut bacteria. She's an expert in the microbiome. She's put out some incredible research. She actually discovered that if you take the COVID-19 vaccines, a few months later, it kills all your bifidobacteria. It kills all the good bacteria in your gut. Mm-hmm. And she has made links between your gut bacteria and your immune system, various diseases, including cancer. You have to fund researchers and scientists like this. And she's been demonized. She's been attacked. She's lost grants. She's had research work that's been blocked. And she's fighting a system. She's an incredible scientist who's made some incredible discoveries, and yet she's struggling to even get research published. And so one of the things we need to do is we need to bring back ethics into medicine, into science, and we need to fund scientists to do the research that, again, may not make much money for the pharmaceutical industry, but may be really, really good for patients.
Certainly. And I think a lot of us grew up believing that that's what medicine was, that's what labs and scientists and university research and peer-reviewed studies, we kind of all thought that that's the way it worked. And COVID really opened our eyes. I mean, the pandemic really showed us, oh, wait a minute, this is a very corrupt, bought-off industry from the top all the way to the bottom. And hopefully we do see some real serious change happening in that community so that we can actually get back to science, real science, and really truly trying to help people. Dr. Makis, are you accepting patients? How can people get a hold of you if they want to hear more from you about some of these specific things?
Actually, I've been actually very unhappy with Mel Gibson, and if I ever get to meet him, I'll tell him that he's made my life a living hell in the past month, because I've been working 18-hour days every day. My patient load went up 5-fold just this past month after his interview, but that's okay. It's fine. But I've just been swamped with requests. But if patients want to reach out to me, I don't have a website. I don't have a sort of a polished system in this. They can just reach out to me through email.
WilliamMakis4205@gmail.com.